What is up, everyone? It is Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some second-year running backs, and just more specifically, whether I would be buying or selling them at their current price, or, maybe kind of playing the middle on a few of these guys, thinking the price is okay, but I'm not necessarily going to be all over it. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on these players down below in the comment section. If you agree, let me know. If you disagree, I also want to hear it. And if you enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But let's jump into probably the most notable second-year running back. It's going to be Breece Hall. Right now, he is going off the board as the running back 10. That is a early third-round pick. And for me, this is going to be a very, very strong buy. Breece Hall is actually my RB6 overall, so getting him as the RB10 I think is great value. And also, just in terms of positionally, he's got a lot of these wide receivers going ahead of him. If you are getting third round Breece Hall, I feel like your team is going to be absolutely stacked, out of the gate here. I think a fully healthy Breece Hall without the ACL tear is probably being drafted in that Bijan Robinson range, somewhere in the RB2, RB3 area. I feel like he'd probably just be firmly behind Christian McCaffrey. So you're kind of getting the discount from the injury, and I'm willing to buy in here. All the reports about his return have been very positive. The recovery seems like it's been going very well. No setbacks, at least to this point. And if we look at Breece Hall's 3-game sample size as the starter, the dude was balling out, averaged 21.2 PPR points per game. This offense gets a massive upgrade with Aaron Rodgers coming in. And so I think Breece Hall is a player who might start slow, working his way back. Maybe they don't give him that full workhorse workload early on, but I bet you he's giving you high-end RB1 production, probably the last 60% of the season, right? The last 3/5 of the season. I feel like that's when he can really start to be unleashed and really just dominate, especially at this RB10 price tag. Back end RB1 for Breece Hall, I absolutely love the value there. So he is a very strong buy. Now, the next running back is going to be Kenneth Walker. He's going off the board as the running back 15, a late 4th round pick. And if you've been, kind of following my channel, you probably know I'm going with a sell here for Kenneth Walker. I talked pretty in depth about him as a guy in my do not draft video. So if you want the full breakdown, go check that one out. But basically, long story short, I just feel like his ADP didn't fall enough after the draft. I feel like if we're looking at Kenneth Walker's ceiling, without a Zach Charbonnet injury, I feel like he's kind of capped to an early down grinder role who's going to be splitting carries. And then I feel like the receiving work is just not going to be there. It wasn't super strong last season, and now the Seahawks go out, draft a guy who is a very strong pass catcher. I just feel like the receiving work is pretty much toast. And so I feel like you're heading into this backfield kind of hoping for a 65-35 carry split. And I think on a positive situation here, Walker maintains the goal line work. I also just don't think that's a guarantee. It's not like Charbonnet is a super small satellite back. This is a big dude. He's probably going to be bigger than Kenneth Walker in that backfield. So if he loses that work, this is not going to be good. You're spending a 4th round pick on Kenneth Walker, which is premium draft capital here for fantasy. I also think the Seahawks could end up being more pass heavy. They added JSN at the wide receiver position. And then, like I mentioned, Charbonnet can catch passes. So even though they did draft a second running back, he could fit an offense that is more pass heavy here in 2023. So I feel like even when we're looking on the positive side for Kenneth Walker, I still don't like this RB15 price tag, especially in the 4th round. So he is going to be a pretty strong sell for me here. Now, the next second-year running back is going to be Dameon Pierce. He's going off the board as the running back 20 in early 6th round. And I'm kind of going to play the fence on this one. I think the price is fine. Not necessarily buying him super heavy, and I'm not really fading him at this price either. I just think it's kind of fair overall. I think Dameon Pierce definitely has the opportunity to take on a big workload this season, and if he can get that workload, he's definitely going to outperform this ADP. But I could also see a situation where he's kind of falling into a committee here with the Texans. And then obviously he's probably not going to be paying off as the RB20 in a committee on this offense. That's probably not going to be great. My personal opinion on Dameon Pierce is I think he's a very talented back. We saw it last season, 13 games, rushed for 939 yards, caught 30 passes for 165 yards, and then scored 5 total touchdowns. Those are impressive numbers, especially on that Texans offense that was just really, really rough. And I think it's even more impressive when you kind of compare his rushing efficiency to some of the other running backs on the roster. So Pierce averaged 4.3 yards per carry, which is fine. It's not a crazy number, But Dare averaged 2.9 yards per carry. Freeman was at 2.9 also, and then Burkhead was at 3.1. Now, obviously, he wasn't competing with studs in that backfield, but still, just averaging 1.2 yards per carry more than the next highest guy, and obviously his sample size was much, much higher there. So, you're kind of getting a more reasonable expectation there. So I think he came in, he made the most of a tough offensive situation. Now, if we're going to flip the script here and kind of look more on the negative side, the negative potential outcome here for Dameon Pierce, we've seen year after year, NFL teams just have pretty much zero loyalty when it comes to these late round running backs. Dameon Pierce was a day 3 pick. You could argue like he was very early 4th round, but still day 3. The track record is just not great. Look at a guy like Tyler Algier, has a great rookie season. What do? They go out, replace him. Even though they got him at a bargain, they're still going out there drafting Bijan Robinson. We saw it with Elijah Mitchell. Not only did they bring in Christian McCaffrey, but they also drafted a 3rd-round running back in Ty Davis-Price. It really didn't work out for him, but they were still kind of looking for another guy to bring into that backfield. James Robinson, a couple years ago, he has a great rookie season, undrafted, cheap contract. They still go out and bring in Travis Etienne. And I also think there's even less loyalty to these running backs when it's a new coaching staff, a new regime kind of coming in here. It's possible that this new coaching staff is just not as high on Pierce as the last one. Maybe they're a little lower on him. And this could kind of turn into a committee here with Devin Singletary, who they've brought in the offseason. Now, I don't think Devin Singletary is like a world beater by any means. I really don't think he's all that great. I would like to think that Dameon Pierce would outperform him, but Devin Singletary is significantly better than every other running back that was on the depth chart last year. Like I went through the guys, no yards per carries, like Dare Ogunbowale, Royce Freeman, Rex Burkhead. Like these guys are not studs, especially at this point in their career. So Devin Singletary is much better than those options. I still think Pierce can break out, but there's clear kind of upside and just room for him to bust here. So I think it's a fair price, not overly in, not overly out. Now the next running back is going to be Isiah Pacheco, going off the board as the running back 23, and he's kind of going at that round 6, round 7 turn. I think this price is fine. I'm going to lean slightly towards a sell if I had to pick a side, just because I think there are other solid running backs, guys like Cam Akers, James Conner, Alexander Mattison. I like those options, and they're all currently like cheaper going after Isiah Pacheco, and I kind of have them all in the same like overall kind of ADP tier. So just the fact that there's cheaper options, I would slightly lean sell, but I still think he could pay off. Pacheco is another one of these late round guys, which like I talked about with Dameon Pierce is a little bit concerning, but it's also the same coaching staff here for the Chiefs, and it's also pretty much the exact same running back room where he saw a lot of success towards the end of the regular season last year. So I'm a little bit less concerned than I would be for a guy like Dameon Pierce in terms of like losing his role completely. We saw Isiah Pacheco take over a really solid workload in the last 9 games of the 2022 season. He averaged 14 carries per game and then 11.7 PPR points per game. He's pretty much going to be getting all his production on the ground. He was basically a 0 in the receiving game last year. Jerick McKinnon kind of filled that role, and he's coming back here in 2023, so I don't really see like Pacheco eating into McKinnon's receiving workload. But when we're looking at kind of Pacheco here and the run-heavy role he had last year, I really feel like his fantasy production is just going to come down to touchdowns. Right on this offense, he could go out, score 10-plus touchdowns. We saw last year in his 9 games as a starter, he's gotten to the end zone 4 times. Over that same stretch of the last 6 games, McKinnon scored 9 touchdowns, but 8 of those were through the air, so it's not exactly like McKinnon was like vulturing these goal line touchdowns from Isiah Pacheco. The reason why I mention the touchdowns is just these guys that don't catch passes, they're just become so reliant on those touchdowns to get those points, because you can have a great overall game, right? Say you carry the ball 16 times, for 80 yards, you're going 5 yards per carry, but you catch 1 pass for 10 yards and you don't score a touchdown. Like, even though that's a solid overall, like, real-life football game, that's just not going to be getting it done for fantasy football. That's like 10 PPR points, which is not great, especially for a guy you're drafting as a top 24 running back. So we look at his point per game number from last year in the games where he was kind of like that guy getting that workload. 11.7 points per game. I think if you draft him here and you get that again, you're probably feeling disappointed. So I'd rather take the swing on guys like James Conner or Alexander Mattison, who could have much larger workloads. But if you like him here, you think he can capitalize on this high-scoring Chiefs offense, I don't totally hate it. Now, the next second-year running back, Rachaad White, running back 25, going in round 7. I think this is a fair price, not leaning super heavy buy or sell. I think if the Bucs make no changes to the running back room and this ADP sticks, I think he'll be a really strong buy. But I also just feel like the Bucs are probably not done at the running back position. I could see them going out, bringing in like an early down grinder. I know they just cut Leonard Fournette. I could see them bringing in a guy like Zeke in. Maybe they look at like a Kareem Hunt option. I don't really know what player they're going to bring in. Maybe those guys want to be on win now rosters. So I think like that would kind of cut into his workload and would hurt him at this ADP. But if no moves are made here in this Bucs wide receiver room, Rachaad White could be lined up for a 3-down role in this offense. We know he can catch passes, very solid in that role. That's kind of what he was known for coming out of college. And just looking at the rest of this Bucs depth chart, right now the running back 2 is Chase Edmonds, who was overall pretty terrible last season. I believe he was traded and then like fell out of the rotation on his second team. Keyshawn Vaughn is the running back 3 and has just been a complete non-factor in his first few seasons. With a new offensive coaching staff coming in, I really wouldn't be shocked if he was released. So like this is not a super stacked running back room behind Rachaad White. So if he is able to hold off competition here, I think he will be a nice payoff at this price. But I will imagine like if we're getting closer to the season and nothing happens, maybe his ADP starts to rise and we'll reevaluate. But if we get to like, a week out from the season and he's chilling here on this depth chart, I do think this will be a price I'd have to buy him at. Now, the next running back is going to be James Cook. We've got one more guy after Cook. James Cook going off the board as the running back 30, a round 8 pick. I think this is a fair price. I think he's another one of these guys where you can see the upside play, and then you could also kind of just see this not working out. Like I could see a world where James Cook is leading this backfield. He's their RB1 on a top-tier NFL offense, which would easily have him outperforming this RB30 ADP. On the other side, I could also see a situation here where this is a strong committee between James Cook and Dameon Harris. You got Dameon Harris taking a lot of the early down work, probably the red zone, goal line, and then you see James Cook filtering in on some carries, getting all the receiving work, which probably would not be great for either of these running backs. Maybe it would be better for Dameon Harris just because he's the cheaper guy at this point. I've kind of seen a narrative going around that the Bills' offense is just a bad offense for running backs. I don't know if that's completely untrue, but I also just feel like they haven't had a ton of stud running backs, right? Like they've had some all right guys. Devin Singletary, you're throwing him out there like a Zach Moss. It's not like they've had these stud running backs and they just haven't been able to produce. I think if they had a guy who stood out, maybe they could give you some solid production in this offense. So I think the opportunity is definitely going to be there for James Cook. I just kind of wonder if he's maybe just not that great, right? I don't think we know that for sure, but you would have liked to see him do a little bit more as a rookie. He didn't have a ton of competition, like I mentioned, and he still only managed to average 5.4 carries per game and 1.9 targets. I feel like this is kind of a pick where at the end of the season, it's either going to look great or it's going to look really tough because he's just kind of fallen into a gross situation. Now, my final second-year running back is going to be Brian Robinson. Obviously, there are a few more guys who may be slightly fantasy relevant, like a Tyler Algier as a handcuff, but these are really the guys that I think we're kind of going to focus in on here. So Brian Robinson, the RB34, a round 9 pick. For me, this is going to be a sell. I just feel like Brian Robinson has zero upside here. And at this ADP, I do think there are going to be some slightly better options. Last season, Brian Robinson averaged 17 carries per game and didn't manage to break 10 PPR points per game. Like, that's honestly tough. That's a really, really strong workload on the ground. And to not hit that 10 point per game number, not great. The receiving upside is just not there. In 12 games, he was only targeted 12 times, so averaging 1 target a game. Now, he was unlucky in the touchdown department, only 3 TDs in 12 games, but it's not like this Commanders offense is going to be some superpower, like high-scoring unit. So maybe over a full season, he's scoring 7, 8, 9 touchdowns, but I don't think it's going to like vault him into really solid fantasy production. And this is kind of like the positive end where he maintains that 17 carry per game workload. Like, I don't really see much improvement on that, but I do see a spot where this just kind of turns into a really gross committee where we don't want to be playing any of these guys. So even if he keeps that same role, I don't really like it. He probably would pay off at this ADP, but it's not like he's going to win you your league, and you're probably just going to be getting like high-end running back 3 production, which really isn't going to be a difference maker in your lineup. I'd much rather take a swing on a guy like Devin Achane, or even honestly wait around on a guy like Dameon Harris, who I kind of mentioned with James Cook, who could play a similar role as like an early down grinder, but going to be on a better offense with more touchdown upside. So that's kind of why I'm out here on B-Rob. Like, if you want a super safe guy who's just going to give you RB3 production, I think he's fine. For me, I'd want to be shooting for some upside or just kind of waiting, taking a handcuff or one of these other options. So those are going to be my takes on these second-year running backs. Overall, I think we have some interesting options. We've got like a clear top guy in Breece Hall, and then a lot of guys where I think their situations could go, in a few different directions. Dameon Pierce, Pacheco, Rachaad White, James Cook. Like, I think those guys are all in very interesting situations where we could see them take a jump in their offense or just kind of fall into a committee and probably be, not super fantasy relevant heading into next season. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you all for stopping by. In a couple days, I'm going to be going through my second-year wide receivers, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all again, and I will see you in the next one.